They told me a mother's love is unbreakable. I believed them until the day my only son looked me in the eye, stepped over the lunchbox I'd carried through security, and let the door close behind him like I was a stranger. I'm Margaret Hale, 62, retired accountant, still counting pennies at the grocery store so the lights stay on, and the last person on earth my boy wanted at his wedding, or his promotion, or the life he traded me for. You're about to hear how I stood on my own porch in a dress older than his new wife, holding apple cinnamon scones that smelled like every birthday he ever had, while they wiped my chairs before sitting, whispered about my origins, and left the gifts on the step like charity for the poor. How I watched him erase me from his photos, his stories, his heart. How I mailed the evidence that brought an empire down. And how, when he came back soaked and broken, I didn't open the door. Not yet. This isn't a fairy tale. Fairy. It's the truth of what happens when love is bartered for a corner office, and what a mother does when the bill comes due. Stay with me. You'll need the whole story before you decide who the real traitor was. My name's Margaret Hale, 62 years young, though some days the mirror argues otherwise. I've got silver hair that used to be chestnut, hands that still remember the weight of a baby boy, and a heart that's been cracked open so wide you could drive a truck through it. But let me start where the hurt began, because if I don't tell you now, the ache will swallow me whole. It was a Tuesday in early autumn, the kind where the leaves haven't decided whether to fall or cling. I'd been up since 4, baking Ethan's favorite, apple cinnamon scones, the ones he used to steal from the cooling rack when he was 8, leaving sticky fingerprints on my apron. My only child, my Ethan. He'd just married Clara, that polished girl with the laugh like breaking crystal, daughter of Vivian Carlisle, vice president of the biggest construction firm in 3 counties. I'd met them at the wedding, of course. I wore the navy dress I'd saved for, the one with the tiny white flowers. I'd even pressed it twice so the collar lay flat. Ethan had kissed my cheek and whispered, "You look beautiful, Mom." And I'd believed him. So when the sleek black SUV rolled up my gravel drive that afternoon, my heart did a little jig. I stepped onto the porch in my old cotton dress, faded blue, hem a tad uneven from years of kneeling in the garden, and held the plate of scones like an offering. The car stopped, doors opened, but nobody moved to help me with the gifts I'd wrapped in the Sunday comics because I'd run out of ribbon. Clara stepped out first, heels clicking like accusations on the concrete. She wrinkled her nose, actually wrinkled it, at the warm, buttery smell drifting from my plate. "Good Lord," she said, loud enough for the hydrangeas to hear. "Is that lard?" Vivian emerged next, sunglasses the size of saucers, lips painted the red of fresh blood. She didn't even glance at me, just swept her gaze over my peeling porch paint and muttered to Clara, "This place really reflects her origin." Origin. Like I was a stain they'd tracked in on Italian leather. Ethan, my Ethan, unfolded from the driver's seat last. He looked expensive. New suit, new haircut, new way of holding his shoulders like the world owed him posture. He smiled, but it was the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind salespeople practice in mirrors. I called out, come in, I've got tea." My voice cracked on the last word, because his eyes flicked to the sagging screen door and away again, as if the house itself embarrassed him. Inside, they perched on my couch like birds on a wire. Clara pulled a packet of wet wipes from her purse, monogrammed naturally, and scrubbed the armrest before letting her manicured hand rest there. Vivian crossed her legs and surveyed my living room, the way a health inspector eyes a greasy spoon. Ethan just stood, adjusting his tie, pretending not to hear me ask if he wanted sugar in his tea. I excused myself to the kitchen because my hands had started shaking so hard I nearly dropped the kettle. I pressed my back to the fridge and counted to 10, the way I used to when he had nightmares at 6 and I'd rock him till the thunder stopped. Only this time, the thunder was inside me. When I came back, plate of scones balanced on a tray with the good cups, the ones with the roses Ethan painted for me in 3rd grade. They hadn't touched a thing. Clara was scrolling her phone, thumbs flying. Vivian was murmuring something about image management. Ethan finally spoke. "Mom, we can't stay long. Big meeting tomorrow." He didn't look at me when he said it. I set the tray down. The scones had cooled into sad little lumps. "Just one bite?" I asked, hearing the beggar in my own voice. Clara laughed, actually laughed, and said, "I'm gluten-free now," as if gluten were a personal offense. Vivian stood smoothing her skirt. "We should go, traffic." Ethan followed her like a puppy on an invisible leash. At the door, I reached for him, my boy, my baby, and he let me hug him for half a second before stepping back. "Love you," he mumbled into my hair, but it sounded rehearsed, like lines from a play he no longer believed in. They left the gifts on the porch. I found them later, a bottle of perfume that smelled like money, and a silk scarf the color of old bruises. I stood there until the taillights disappeared, plate of scones growing cold in my hands, the autumn wind sneaking under my dress to chill the tears I hadn't let fall yet. That night, I sat in Ethan's old room. The posters were gone. He'd taken them when he moved out. But the indent in the carpet from his bed was still there, a ghost footprint. I opened the closet and pulled out the box I kept for emergencies. His first tooth, a lock of hair from his first haircut, the Mother's Day card that said, "You are my hero," in crooked crayon. I held them to my chest and whispered, "What did I do wrong?" The house didn't answer. It just creaked around me, old bones settling into the dark. Little did I know, that was only the first crack in the dam. The flood was coming. "Sweetheart, pour yourself another cup." The tea's gone bitter, but so have the memories, and we're not done steeping yet. That visit on the porch was just the opening act. The real show started a week later, when the phone calls stopped coming. I'd always called Ethan every Sunday at 7, right after the evening news. He'd pick up on the second ring, voice warm as fresh bread. "Hey Mom, tell me about your week." I'd ramble about the grocery store books, Mrs. Jenkins shortchanging herself on coupons, Mr. Patel's new baby, and he'd laugh in all the right places. But after the porch day, the line went cold. I'd dial, let it ring until the voicemail clicked, then hang up before the beep. I didn't want to leave a message that sounded like begging. 3 Sundays in, I broke. I drove to the city, lunchbox on the passenger seat. Inside, his childhood favorite, chicken and dumplings, the kind that stick to your ribs and your heart. I'd made it at dawn, humming the lullaby I sang when he had ear infections. The security guard at Carlisle Construction Towers took one look at my station wagon, rust spots blooming like bruises, and shook his head. "Name? Margaret Hale. I'm here for my son, Ethan Hale. He's future director," he finished, smirking. "No visitors without clearance." I held up the lunchbox like a passport. "It's just food." He buzzed someone, a crackle, then Ethan's voice, tinny, impatient. "Tell her I'm in a meeting." Click. I stood there in the marble lobby, fluorescent lights buzzing like hornets. 2 junior staffers, kids really, barely older than Ethan when he left for college, whispered behind manicured hands. "She dresses like a maid and still wants to meet the future director." The words landed between my shoulder blades as I turned to leave. My heel caught on the mat. The lunchbox slipped. Lid popped. Dumplings rolled across the floor like pale marbles, gravy pooling around my sensible shoes. I knelt to gather them, fingers trembling in the mess. In the mirrored column, I caught Ethan's reflection. He'd come down after all. He looked at the spill, at me, then at his watch. Turned away. I left the box on the reception desk. The guard didn't stop me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the classifieds. The grocery store had cut my hours. New manager, new rules. The electric bill stared at me like a hungry cat. I circled jobs in red ink, night cleaner, laundromat attendant, anything. My hands shook so hard the pen left comet tails. I told myself it was low blood sugar. I told myself a lot of things. Then the photos started disappearing. I'd kept a little album on the mantel: Ethan's graduation, us at the county fair, him in his first suit for the interview that landed him the junior engineer gig. One morning, I reached for it and found empty space. I thought I'd misplaced it, until I logged onto Facebook. Yes, I'd finally learned, Ethan insisted, and saw his profile scrubbed clean. No trace of me. The Happy Mother's Day post from last year? Gone. In its place, a glossy shot of him and Clara at some rooftop gala. Her in sequins, him in a tux that cost more than my car. Caption: grateful for the woman who elevated me. Comments exploded with heart emojis. I scrolled until my thumb cramped. I called him, straight to voicemail. Texted, saw your new photos. Proud of you, honey. Miss you. The bubble appeared, then vanished. No reply. Weeks bled into months. I'd see him on the local news. Carlisle construction breaking ground on a luxury condo tower. Ethan, smiling beside Vivienne, shaking hands with the mayor. The anchor called him a self-made man. I laughed until I cried, because the only thing self-made about my boy was the lie he'd built brick by brick. Then came the document. I found out from Mrs. Alvarez next door. She'd overheard Clara bragging at the beauty salon. A financial independence commitment. Sounded fancy, didn't it? Meant Ethan had to cut all ties, no money, no contact, to prove he wasn't dragging dead weight. Dead weight. That's what I'd become. The paper was signed in the boardroom, witnessed by Vivienne herself. Clara posted a selfie right after. Proud wife moment. Watching my husband level up. #JarkNoBaggage. I drove to the city again. This time, no lunchbox. Just me, in my Sunday dress, hair twisted up with the clip Ethan gave me for my 50th. The same guard recognized me. "Ma'am, I know the way." I walked past him, past the whispers, straight to the elevators. 23rd floor, glass walls. Ethan's new office had his name on the door in brushed steel. I knocked. He opened it himself. For a second, I saw my boy, the one who used to hide behind my legs at the grocery store. Then the mask slammed down. "Mom, you can't be here. I just want to talk." "There's nothing to say." He glanced over my shoulder, Clara hovering like a vulture in pearls. "You're embarrassing me." Embarrassing. The word hit harder than a slap. I reached for his hand. He pulled away like I'd burned him. "Please go." I went. That night, I took every photo of him down. Not in anger. I was too hollow for anger. I wrapped them in tissue, the way I'd wrapped his baby teeth, and slid the box under my bed. Then I opened the yellow pages, yes, the actual book, and looked up vocational schools. My accounting brain ticked like it used to when balancing ledgers. Numbers don't lie, people do. I started small. A night class at the community center. Basic bookkeeping for women returning to work. The instructor was a retired nurse named Dolores, 65 if she was a day, voice like gravel and honey. 12 students, all of us with stories in our crow's feet. Divorced, widowed, abandoned. We learned debits and credits like we were learning to breathe again. I kept my grocery store job, mornings balancing produce scales, nights balancing hope. The electric bill got paid. The house stopped creaking quite so loud, and somewhere between the smell of chalk dust and the click of calculator keys, I found a spark I thought Ethan had stolen. But sparks catch, and fires burn. The appointment ceremony was the match. The appointment ceremony? Oh, they made a circus of it. Banners the size of bed sheets flapping over the construction site, gold letters screaming, "Ethan Hale, Technical Director." Television vans parked 3 deep, reporters powdering noses under portable mirrors. I watched it on the little set in my kitchen, volume low so the neighbors wouldn't hear me gasp. They'd chosen the future condo tower's foundation pit for the stage. Symbolic, Vivienne said, rising from the ground up. Ethan stood on a platform of polished plywood, sunlight glinting off the hard hat someone had bedazzled with the company logo. Clara clung to his arm like ivy on marble. Vivienne took the podium first, voice smooth as poured concrete. Today, we honor a self-made man who started with nothing and built everything. Nothing. The word lodged in my throat like a fishbone. The mayor handed Ethan a ceremonial key the length of my forearm. Flashbulbs popped. Ethan actually bowed, to Vivienne and Clara, thanking the only two women who have ever guided my life. The crowd roared. My television flickered. For a second, I thought the screen had cracked. It was just my reflection, tears warping the glass. Mrs. Alvarez knocked later, holding a casserole she didn't expect me to eat. "Didn't he mention you at all?" she whispered. I shook my head, managed a smile that felt borrowed. He was nervous. Lots of important people. She patted my hand and left the dish anyway. I fed it to the stray cat that had started sleeping on my porch. That night, Ethan posted the video. I shouldn't have watched, but grief is a masochist. 30 seconds of him in a tux, Clara's diamond catching the light like a warning. "To my wife and my mother-in-law," he said, voice thick with rehearsed gratitude. "You taught me that family is earned, not given." Comments poured in. "What a king." "Vivian is goals." "Clara's so supportive." I read until the words blurred. Then I did something I hadn't done since the day he was born. I screamed. Not loud enough to wake the dead, just enough to rattle the windows. The cat bolted. I took his senior photo off the fridge, the one where he's missing a front tooth and grinning like the world was a joke only he understood, and slid it into the drawer with the others. The magnet clattered to the floor. I left it there. The next morning, I called in sick to the grocery store. First time in 12 years. I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen that skipped. At the top, I wrote, "What I still have." Then I listed 1. The house, mortgage almost paid. 2. My CPA license, expired but renewable. 3. 38 years balancing books for people who trusted me. 4. A classroom full of women who look at me like I might know something worth knowing. I underlined the last one twice. The community center class had grown. Word spread the way gossip does in beauty parlors and church basements. Margaret Hale teaches numbers like she's teaching survival. We'd outgrown Dolores's folding tables. I started bringing my own whiteboard, scavenged from the high school dumpster after renovations. The women brought casseroles, Tupperware stacked like bricks. We ate while we worked, grease spotting the margins of their practice ledgers. One night, a new student showed up. Luann, 55, hands raw from factory work. She stared at the board where I'd written assets and liabilities plus equity and started crying. Not delicate tears, big, ugly sobs that shook the metal chairs. "My husband took everything," she choked out. "Left me the dog and the electric bill." The room went still. I capped the marker, walked over, and put my arms around her the way I used to hold Ethan when he fell off his bike. "Then we'll make you the richest woman in liabilities," I said. Someone laughed. Someone else passed tissues. We stayed until midnight, building Luann a budget that could withstand hurricanes. I started dreaming in columns. Debits on the left, credits on the right. My life balanced for the first time since the porch. But dreams have a way of leaking into daylight. 3 months after the ceremony, the first rumor hit the beauty salon circuit. Trouble at Carlisle Construction. Missing permits, shell companies, numbers that didn't add up. I heard it from Dolores, who heard it from her cousin who cleaned the executive bathrooms. "They're saying Ethan signed off on something shady," she whispered over coffee. I felt the old panic rise. My boy, my baby. But then I remembered the hard hat, the bow, the self-made man. I poured Dolores another cup and said nothing. The second rumor came with paperwork. An envelope slid under my door at 2 a.m. No stamp, no return address. Inside, photocopies of contracts, Ethan's signature looping across the bottom like a noose. Money laundering through fake subcontractors. Millions. I sat on the floor in my nightgown and read until the words swam. At the very back, a post-it. He didn't know. She did. No signature, but the handwriting was Clara's. Those perfect Catholic school loops. I should have burned it. Instead, I made copies. Then I made a plan. The women in my class became my army. Luann's cousin worked nights at the county clerk. Dolores knew a retired IRS agent who owed her a favor. We met after hours in the community center, fluorescent lights humming like conspirators. I taught them forensic accounting the way other people teach bridge, quietly, ruthlessly. Every ledger we balanced was a brick in the wall I was building around Vivian's empire. Ethan never called, not once, but the newspapers did. Carlisle heir, implicated in fraud. His face on the front page, eyes wide like a deer that finally sees the headlights. I clipped it, added it to the drawer. The cat watched me, tail flicking. Then came the night the sky fell. I was locking up the center when headlights swept the parking lot. A taxi idled, exhaust curling in the cold. Ethan stumbled out, suit rumpled, tie askew. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead. He looked 30 going on 60. "Mom?" His voice cracked on the single syllable. I stood under the awning, keys biting into my palm. The sign above me glowed. Women's Vocational Training Center, M. Hale. Fresh paint, still wet. He stared at it like it was written in a language he'd forgotten. "Mom, please." He took a step. The taxi pulled away. "They took everything. Clara's gone. Vivian, she set me up. I didn't know." I didn't move. The rain soaked him through. Somewhere inside, a woman laughed at a joke I couldn't hear. "I have nowhere else," he said. I looked at the puddle forming around his Italian shoes. Shoes I'd never seen before the wedding. "You made your choice," I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. He sank to his knees on the wet concrete. "I'm sorry." The door behind me opened. Luann peered out, apron dusted with flour from the baking module we'd added. "Everything okay, Margaret?" "Fine," I said. "Lock up behind me." I stepped past him, close enough to smell the expensive cologne gone sour with fear. My hand brushed the envelope in my coat pocket, the one addressed to the district attorney, postmarked tomorrow. I didn't look back, but I did leave the porch light on. Old habits. The rain that night was the kind that soaks through bone. I heard it drumming on the roof of the center long after Ethan's taxi had disappeared. I didn't sleep. I sat at the folding table we used for exams, the anonymous envelope in front of me like a loaded gun. Inside, every contract, every forged signature, every offshore account number. I'd spent 6 weeks piecing it together with the women, nights when the center should have been dark, lit only by the glow of a single desk lamp and the fury we passed around like communion wine. Luann found the first thread. Her cousin at the clerk's office pulled a permit filed under a company name that didn't exist until 3 days after Ethan's promotion. Dolores's IRS friend traced the routing numbers to a shell in the Caymans. Another student, Rosa, whose brother drove a delivery truck for Carlisle, brought photocopies of invoices that never left the warehouse. We worked in silence, the scratch of pens louder than accusations. When we were done, the stack was 2 inches thick and heavier than sin. I mailed it at 5:17 a.m. from the post office on Maple, the one with the flickering neon that buzzes like a dying bee. No return address, just MH in the corner, block letters I practiced until they didn't look like mine. I watched the clerk stamp it, the thud of the cancellation mark sounding final as a coffin lid. The arrest came faster than I expected. Vivian was taken from her corner office in handcuffs, pearls clacking against the metal like hail on a tin roof. The news looped the footage all day. Her face twisted in disbelief, mouth forming words the censors bleeped. Clara vanished. Rumors said private jet to Lisbon, or maybe just the next rich husband. Ethan was questioned for 12 hours, released when the documents surfaced, proving he'd signed what was put in front of him, but never seen the money. The headlines shifted. Pawn in mother-in-law's scheme. His face, pale and hollow-eyed, filled the screen. I turned the television off. The center grew. Word spread through beauty parlors and food banks. Margaret Hale teaches women how to never be poor again. We added modules, budgeting, credit repair, small business loans. The county gave us a grant after Luann's testimony at a women's shelter fundraiser. I hired Dolores full-time. Rosa brought her nieces. The folding tables became real desks, secondhand but sturdy. I painted the sign myself, the M. Hale in bold black, because I'd earned every letter. Ethan came back on a Tuesday in March, sky the color of dishwater. The center was buzzing. 20 women bent over laptops, the printer humming like a beehive. He stood in the doorway in a coat 2 sizes too big, the one I'd bought him for his first winter internship. His shoes were scuffed. He held an envelope the way a drowning man holds driftwood. "Mom." His voice barely carried over the typing. I was at the whiteboard, mid-lesson on depreciation schedules. I capped the marker. 20 pairs of eyes flicked between us, then back to their screens. They knew the rules. No interruptions unless the building was on fire. "Class dismissed in 10 minutes, I said. "Finish the exercise. Luann, collect the sheets." I walked past him into the office that used to be a storage closet. He followed, closing the door with a click that sounded too loud. The envelope trembled in his hands. "I'm acquitted," he said. "They said I was manipulated." I leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "Good." He flinched. "I know I don't deserve." "You don't." The words came out flat, final. I'd practiced them in the mirror until they stopped tasting like acid. He opened the envelope, pulled out a single sheet. "I wrote this for you." I didn't take it. "Read it." His voice shook. "Dear Mom, the position I hold is the one who stands outside, in the rain, begging for a door that won't open. I traded the only title that mattered for one that crumbled the first time it was tested. I'm sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have left." He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "I'll do anything. Sweep floors, make coffee. Just let me earn it back." I studied him, the slope of his shoulders, the way his hands couldn't stay still. My boy was in there somewhere, buried under layers of someone else's ambition. But the hole he'd left in me had scabbed over with something harder than forgiveness. "You want to earn it?" I said. "Start with the truth. Every board meeting, every dinner, every time you let them erase me. Write it down. All of it. Then give it to the women out there. Let them decide if you're worth the air you're breathing in my building." He nodded so hard I thought his neck would snap. I opened the door. "Luann, show Mr. Hale where we keep the legal pads." He hesitated. "Mom, Mrs. Hale," I corrected. "In here, I'm Mrs. Hale." He walked out, shoulders hunched. The women watched him like hawks. Luann handed him a pad and a pen that had seen better decades. He sat in the corner, head bowed, and started writing. I went back to the board. "Depreciation," I said, voice steady, "is the cost of using something up. Let's talk about what can't be written off." The lesson continued. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The center never closed its doors after that Tuesday. Ethan stayed until the streetlights came on, filling page after page in cramped handwriting. When he ran out of legal pads, Rosa wordlessly slid another across the table. No one spoke to him. No one had to. The silence was its own verdict. At 9:03 p.m. he stood, stack of papers trembling in his grip, and laid them on my desk like an offering. I didn't look up from the grant application I was finishing. "Leave them," I said. "I'll read when I'm ready." He hovered a moment, then left without a word. The bell above the door gave its tired jingle. I locked up behind him. I read the confession at 2 a.m. under the gooseneck lamp that buzzed like a trapped moth. 47 pages. Every dinner where Vivian mocked my provincial table manners. Every time Clara deleted a photo while he watched. The day he told his new colleagues I was in a nursing home because it sounded cleaner. The moment he signed the financial independence clause and felt relief instead of shame. He wrote until the pen gave out, then switched to pencil, the lead smudging under tears I refused to imagine. I folded the pages into a manila envelope and slid it into the file cabinet under closed. Then I went home and slept without dreaming for the first time in 2 years. Spring arrived with dogwoods and deadlines. The county grant came through, $47,000 for equipment and a part-time counselor. We bought 10 refurbished computers, a color printer, and a coffee machine that didn't sound like a dying lawnmower. Enrollment tripled. Women drove in from 2 counties over, carpooling in minivans with cracked windshields and hope in their eyes. We added evening sessions, then Saturday mornings. I hired 2 graduates as assistants, Luann for bookkeeping, Rosa for small business planning. Their first paychecks were modest, but the way they held them, you'd think I'd handed over gold bars. Ethan came back every Tuesday, same coat, same hollow look. He swept, took out trash, fixed the leaky faucet in the women's restroom with duct tape and prayer. The students ignored him unless they needed a chair moved. One afternoon, a new enrollee, Marisol, 48, fresh from a shelter, asked who the quiet man was. Luann answered without looking up from her ledger. Volunteer. Don't feed him after midnight. A ripple of laughter. Ethan's mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile. I let him stay. Not for him. For them. Watching a man scrub floors who once wore $1,000 shoes taught more about consequences than any lecture I could give. The final piece arrived in June, hand-delivered by a process server in a cheap suit. Vivian's trial date, September 12th. Subpoena for Margaret Hale. Material witness. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. The women found me in the supply closet, sitting on a box of printer paper, subpoena clutched like a death notice. Luann crouched beside me. You don't have to go. I do, I said, but not alone. We prepared like soldiers. Rosa pulled court transcripts from similar cases. Dolores coached me on cross-examination. Keep answers short, never volunteer. We practiced in the classroom after hours, me on the witness stand, a folding chair, Luann playing the prosecutor with a ruthless gleam. By August, I could recite the money trail in my sleep. Ethan asked to come. I told him no. Your name stays out of the courtroom. This isn't your redemption tour. He nodded, eyes on the floor he'd just mopped. The trial was held in the old courthouse downtown, the one with marble steps worn smooth by a century of guilty feet. Reporters camped on the lawn. I walked past them in the navy suit I'd bought for Ethan's wedding, hair twisted up with the same clip. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted, Mrs. Hale, do you forgive your son? I kept walking. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and fear. Vivian sat at the defense table in a charcoal suit, thinner, hair still perfect. When I was called, our eyes met. Hers flicked to the clip in my hair, recognition, then something colder. I took the oath, voice steady. The prosecutor started easy. Employment history, relationship to the defendant, then the contracts. I identified Ethan's signature, explained the routing numbers, the shell companies. Vivian's lawyer tried to rattle me. Didn't your son benefit? Wasn't he ambitious? I answered yes, yes, and yes. Then I added, ambition without conscience is just greed in a better suit. The jury leaned forward. Vivian's jaw tightened. On cross, her attorney went for the jugular. Isn't it true you're motivated by revenge? Your son abandoned you, and now you want to destroy his family? The courtroom stilled. I felt every eye like a pinpoint of heat. I looked straight at Vivian. My son made his choices. I'm here for the women whose retirement funds were laundered through your fake subcontractors. I'm here for the single mother who lost her house because your company defaulted on a loan it never intended to repay. If that's revenge, then yes, I'm guilty. The gavel banged. Objection sustained, but the damage was done. The jury didn't look at Vivian the same after that. She was convicted on 12 counts. Sentencing, 15 years, no parole for 10. Clara surfaced in Portugal, extradition pending. Ethan's name appeared exactly once in the verdict. Duped accomplice, no charges. The newspapers called it justice. I called it Tuesday. Back at the center, the women threw a potluck. No speeches, just food and music from someone's phone hooked to a speaker. Ethan carried in folding tables, set up chairs. When the tamales were gone and the flan scraped clean, Luann handed him a plate anyway. He ate standing up, like he didn't trust himself to sit. Later, as I locked the gate, he lingered by the fence. "Mom!" "Mrs. Hale," he swallowed. "Mrs. Hale, the women, they voted, unanimous. I can keep coming, Tuesdays and Thursdays, whatever you need." I studied him in the sodium light. The coat was gone, replaced by a center t-shirt, 2 sizes too big, women's vocational training. We balance more than books. His hands were stained with ink from fixing the printer. "Probation," I said. 6 months. You miss a day, you're out. You speak out of turn, you're out. You earn trust the way everyone else does, one ledger at a time. He nodded so hard the porch light caught the tears he didn't bother hiding. I turned to go. Then, because some habits die harder than others, I added, "Bring donuts tomorrow, the good ones, not the day-olds." His laugh cracked like ice breaking. "Yes, ma'am." I didn't look back, but I heard him whistle the lullaby I used to sing when he had nightmares. Off-key, but trying. Inside, the whiteboard waited. I uncapped a fresh marker and wrote tomorrow's lesson. Equity, what remains when everything else is subtracted. The donuts arrived at 7:42 a.m., 2 dozen, still warm, from the bakery on 5th that used to be a gas station. Ethan carried the boxes like they were fragile explosives. Luann inspected them, nodded once, and slid one into the break room fridge labeled "Staff Only." The rest disappeared into eager hands before I'd finished unlocking the classrooms. No one thanked him out loud, but Marisol slipped him a coffee in a chipped mug that said "World's Okayest Volunteer." He drank it black, standing by the window, watching the parking lot fill with women who no longer looked like they were running from something. Summer baked the suburbs. The center's ancient window unit wheezed like an asthmatic cat, so we propped the doors open and set box fans in the hallways. Enrollment hit 93. We split into cohorts, beginners at 9 a.m., advanced at 1 p.m., small business track on Saturdays. The county sent a photographer for a feature in the quarterly newsletter. I wore the navy suit again. The clip in my hair caught the flash and threw it back like a dare. Ethan's probation became routine. Tuesdays he restocked supplies. Thursdays he tutored the beginners who froze at negative numbers. He had a gift for it. Patience I'd forgotten he owned. When a student named Tanya burst into tears over a payroll tax worksheet, he didn't flinch. Just pushed the tissue box closer and said, "Mistakes are just debits in the wrong column. We'll move them." She laughed through snot, finished the sheet, and passed the final with a 94. I watched from the doorway, arms folded so tight my knuckles went white. Forgiveness is a slow audit. Every entry has to balance. In July, the center hosted its first graduation. 22 women in paper caps we'd stapled ourselves, holding certificates printed on cardstock Rosa bought in bulk. The local paper sent a cub reporter who kept calling me the plucky grandma. I let it slide. The photo spread was worth it. Ethan stood in the back row, arms full of punch cups, eyes shining like he'd been allowed in church after a long excommunication. After the ceremony, the graduates presented me with a plaque. Margaret Hale, architect of second chances, hand-carved by Marisol's son, who'd learned woodworking in juvie. I hung it above the whiteboard where everyone could see it. Ethan traced the letters with one finger, careful not to smudge the varnish. August brought heat lightning and a letter from the state. They'd audited Vivian's seized assets. Among the properties, my old house, technically still in Ethan's name, signed over to a shell company the day he cut ties. The state planned to auction it for restitution. I read the notice twice, then handed it to Luann without a word. She read it, cursed in Spanish, and started making phone calls. We raised the money in 9 days. Bake sales, car washes, a GoFundMe that went viral after a local influencer, graduate number 17, posted a video of her daughter reading bedtime stories in the bedroom that used to be Ethan's. The total came to $112,000. I wrote the check myself, pen steady, and mailed it certified. Title transferred back to M. Hale Vocational Center Expansion Fund. The auction never happened. Ethan found out from the county clerk. He showed up the next Thursday with a bottle of sparkling cider and a face like a man who'd been handed a pardon and a prison sentence in the same envelope. "You bought it," he said. "My house. Our house. Our house is wherever these women learn they're worth more than the lies they were sold," I replied. "But yes, the deed's in the safe. When you've earned it, we'll talk about what comes next." He didn't argue, just opened the cider and poured it into the same chipped mugs we used for coffee. The toast was silent. No one needed words. September 12th, Vivian's sentencing day, dawned cool. I drove to the courthouse alone. The gallery was packed with reporters and a handful of Carlisle employees who'd lost pensions. Vivian wore prison orange, wrists cuffed in front. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she looked straight at me. "I built an empire," she said, voice raspy from disuse. "You're scavenging in the ruins." The judge gave her 20 years. I didn't smile. I just stood, smoothed my skirt, and walked out past the cameras without a sound. That night, the center threw an ice cream social. Ethan served Rocky Road to a line of sticky-fingered kids while their mothers compared job offers. Someone started singing Sweet Caroline off-key. The rest joined in. I stood on the porch, cider in hand, watching fireflies blink against the dark. The house next door, Mrs. Alvarez's, had a for sale sign. I made a mental note to call the realtor. More classrooms. Ethan joined me, shirt speckled with chocolate. "Probation's up in 2 weeks," he said quietly. "I know. Whatever you decide," I cut him off. "Decisions aren't unilateral anymore. The board votes. You'll abide." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Inside, Luan clinked a spoon against a bowl. Speech. The room quieted. I raised my cider. "To the women who turned ledgers into lifelines," I said. "And to the ones still learning the numbers don't define them." Cheers. Ethan's eyes met mine over the rim of his mug. For the first time in years, I didn't look away. October arrived with the smell of wood smoke and possibility. The center's first anniversary fell on a Saturday, and we turned the parking lot into a carnival. Folding tables draped in checkered cloth, a borrowed cotton candy machine coughing pink clouds, kids chasing balloons while their mothers swapped resumes like baseball cards. The local radio station sent a DJ who played nothing but Motown and took requests in exchange for donations. By noon, we'd raised enough for a new roof. The board meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. after the last balloon popped and the cotton candy sugar had been hosed off the asphalt. We'd formalized the board over the summer. 7 women, all graduates, elected by secret ballot. Luann chaired. Rosa took minutes on a laptop that no longer wheezed. I sat at the head of the table, not because I was boss, but because the chair was closest to the coffee pot. Agenda item 1, Ethan Hale's permanent status. Luann didn't waste words. Probation complete. No absences, no complaints. Tutored 23 students to certification. Fixed the copier 17 times. Motion to offer paid part-time position. Administrative assistant and beginner tutor. Starting wage, same as the rest of us earned our first year. Rosa seconded before the echo died. Discussion was brief and brutal. Marisol spoke first. "He cried when my son gave him a Father's Day card by mistake. Didn't correct the kid, just said thank you." Tanya added, "He stayed until midnight helping me redo my taxes after the IRS letter. Didn't ask for a dime." A newer graduate, Keisha, still raw from her own divorce, wasn't convinced. "Men like that don't change. They just learn better masks." The room nodded in places, frowned in others. I stayed silent. My vote was last, and I'd promised myself I wouldn't sway them. Luann called it. "All in favor?" 5 hands. "Opposed?" 2. Motion carried. Ethan was summoned from the supply closet where he'd been counting printer paper like a penitent. Luann handed him the offer letter on center letterhead, our new logo, a balance scale inside an open door, embossed at the top. He read it twice, lips moving. When he looked up, his eyes were wet but steady. "I accept," he said. "Thank you." Keisha stood. "One condition, you wear the t-shirt. Every day, no exceptions." She tossed him a fresh one, size large, still folded. He pulled it over his head right there in the doorway. We balanced more than books stretched across his chest. The room applauded, polite but real. I stood. "Meeting adjourned. Cleanup crew, you're on dishes." Later, when the lights were low and the last chair stacked, Ethan lingered by the whiteboard. I was erasing the day's carnival budget. $1.237 profit, every penny accounted for. He picked up a sponge, started on the lower corner. "Mom," he said, voice barely above the squeak of marker. "The house. The deed. I don't want it back. Not like that." I kept erasing. "It's not yours to give. It belongs to the center now. But there's an apartment over the garage. Used to be your dad's workshop. Roof leaks. Mice probably throwing parties. Fix it up. You can live there. Rents 1 ledger a month. Teach the advanced cohort forensic accounting. We'll deduct utilities from your paycheck." He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "I know how to patch a roof. Dad taught me." "Your dad taught you a lot of things," I said. "Some stuck better than others." He nodded, sponge dripping. "I'll start tomorrow." The mice did throw parties. Ethan moved in with a duffel bag, an air mattress, and a toolbox older than he was. Nights, I'd see his light on past midnight. Him at the folding table he'd salvaged, teaching himself the software we used for grant reports. Mornings, he brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and left my mug on the desk with 2 sugars, no cream, the way I'd drunk it since he was in diapers. Thanksgiving, we fed 87 people in the expanded dining room, former storage shed, now insulated and painted butter yellow. Ethan carved turkeys until his wrists ached. I made the dumplings, enough for an army. When the last plate was cleared, the women formed a circle, held hands, and sang Amazing Grace off-key but fierce. Ethan stood beside me, shoulder to shoulder, voice cracking on the high notes. I didn't move away. December brought the first snowfall and a letter from the state penitentiary. Vivian's appeal denied. A second envelope, thinner, forwarded by the public defender. A single sheet in her spidery script. "You won. Enjoy the scraps." I read it once, folded it into a paper airplane, and let Keisha launch it into the fireplace. The flames took it without ceremony. Christmas Eve, the center closed early. I locked the gate, turned to find Ethan on the porch with a string of lights and a stapler. "Thought the fence could use some cheer," he said. We hung them together, fingers numb, breath fogging. When the last bulb glowed, he plugged the cord into the outlet by the door. The fence lit up like a runway. Inside, the apartment smelled of pine cleaner and fresh paint. He'd hung a wreath on the door, real pine, not plastic. I stepped over the threshold for the first time. The workshop benches were gone, replaced by a second-hand couch and a card table. On the wall, a corkboard pinned with student thank you notes, his pay stubs, and a photo I hadn't seen in years, me holding him the day he learned to ride a bike, both of us grinning like fools. He cleared his throat. "I made cocoa, the good kind, with the little marshmallows." I took the mug. Our fingers brushed. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't flinch. We sat on the couch, knees not quite touching. Snow tapped the window. He spoke first. "I used to think success was a title on a door. Now I know it's when Tanya calls to say she got the promotion, or Marisol's son asks me to teach him fractions." I sipped the cocoa. "Perfect. Titles rust," I said. "People don't." He was quiet a long time. Then, "I'm not asking for the past back, just room in the margin." I set the mug down. "Margins are where we write the truth when the columns lie. You've earned a line, maybe 2. He smiled, small and careful. Outside, the lights blinked red, green, gold. Inside, The radiator clanked like an old friend clearing its throat. If my story moved you, if it made your chest tighten or your eyes sting just a little, then please share it, post it, text it, read it aloud over coffee with someone who needs to hear that betrayal doesn't get the final word. Tag a friend, a sister, a mother, anyone carrying quiet pain in a brave smile. And if you're ready to turn your own numbers around, look up your local women's center, community college, or small business resource office. One class, one spreadsheet, one fearless step. You don't have to wait for permission. I'm living proof. The ledger always balances, but only if you keep writing. Now it's your turn.